This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Well, Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
At T. Rowe Price, our curiosity lights the way to help you plan ahead for what matters to you most. Work directly with us, and together, we can help uncover the right investments for you at every stage of your life, whatever your goals. That's the power of curiosity. Better questions, better outcomes. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence. Visit troweprice.com/investdirect to learn more.
I'm Stephen Metcalf, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest Should Stolen Artifacts Return Home edition. It's Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. On today's show, Dahomey is the new documentary from filmmaker Mati Diop. It follows the return of 26 plundered artifacts stolen by colonial France from Dahomey, now known as the Republic of Benin. The film blends elements of fact and whimsy. And then Rachel Bloom, the creator and star of the TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, returns with a Netflix special, Death Let Me Do My Show, a reflection on the period in her life when, in the early and most harrowing phase of the pandemic, she gave birth to a daughter with postnatal complications and lost her beloved collaborator, Adam Schlesinger, to COVID. And finally, what does Mark Zuckerberg's I don't know how to even describe it. Like wildly dorky, weird, misbegotten new look. Tell us about fill in the blank, Zuck, Silicon Valley, the state of Facebook, and our godforsaken world. Joining me first is Rebecca Onion. She's a senior editor at Slate. And of course, a writer for Slate, a wonderful writer for Slate and a historian. Rebecca, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks so much. I always love being on the show. Is
it my imagination, or has it been an eternity since I spoke to you?
Yeah, because she was on recently, but you weren't on that episode.
That's exactly it. Yep.
All right, time to rectify. And of course, Dana Stevens is the film critic for Slate. Hey, Dana.
Hey.
All right, let's make a show. Dahomey follows the return of 26 artifacts from a museum in Paris to the Republic of Benin, where they were seized as colonial plunder in the late 19th century. Running at a little over an hour, the film is a curious blend of Frederick Weissman fly-on-the-wall style. With camera as neutral observer, we watch as the items are packed up in France, unpacked in Benin, examined, cataloged, and then they have their moral, political, and spiritual significance discussed at length by a group of Beninese students. But then alongside that, there's this sheer poetic whimsy. Throughout the film, one artifact in particular, number 26, speaks to us about the experience of being repatriated. I lost myself in my dreams, becoming one with these walls, cut off from the land of my birth as if I was dead, it says at the beginning of the film. Playing a clip is a little tricky because most of the film is either in French or an indigenous dialect known as Fon, F-O-N. We're going to play a clip from the trailer in which we hear the narration of the artwork itself as it awaits rescue. It's going to just give you something of the flavor of the film. All right, we're going to break with form a little bit. Typically for a film, I'd start with our film critic, Dana Stevens. But Rebecca, you're a historian. You're trained as a historian. I'm very curious to know what you made of a film about a hugely important, maybe the subject organizing our thoughts on history right now, the relationship between the global North and the global South, colonialism and post-colonialism, and who owns what. What do you make of this?
I thought it was tremendous. I have edited pieces, written pieces about the repatriation movement, the sort of increasingly widespread move to get stuff that's been taken back to the people it was taken from the different museums across the world. And this got at the sort of gnarled up, tangled up ball of significance around the move in a way that I think is totally exceptional. It's funny because, this movie is short. It's only, I think, an hour and change, maybe an hour and 8 minutes or something. And after I watched it last night, I went on Letterboxd. I have this new habit of going on Letterboxd and seeing what people think, which is sometimes a fool's errand. But in this particular case, I was very curious because I was like, it's a documentary. But it's got like almost science fictional elements to it in this interesting way. And I just was like, what are people thinking about this blend? And some people felt like the big difference between the statue speaking, the sort of more observed moments of the statue being packed and unpacked and observed for the first time in the museum, and then the students talking was too much for them. Like they felt like it was too discordant. But I actually thought that worked really well to get at the question of significance. Some of the students voiced their sort of skepticism or disbelief that this thing even matters. These are university students. They're probably like in their early 20s. And some of them say, I cried when I first saw the bronzes, back with us. And some of them are like, this is ridiculous. We're all hungry. Like, who cares? Who cares that we have these statues back? A museum is like, nobody can even visit it. Nobody has money. So why does it even matter? And somehow, if you just see these two opinions written down in text, you're like, yeah, sure. These are two things that one could think about the significance of historical objects and museums and access to museums. But the way that it's sort of tied up with the buy-in that you already have to the journey of the statue, at least that I had, and your mileage may vary, kind of brings it all together in a really sort of moving way. What did you guys think about the blend, the melange of ways of looking at it?
I mean, first of all, I love the audacity of this documentary, and then it didn't fit into any known documentary format. It didn't comfortably introduce you to a world and start explaining to you that world. So the first thing you experience, I think, out of darkness, and then maybe you see the statue, is the voice that we heard a little bit of in the clip of this statue speaking to you, which, having seen the movie in a theater, I really recommend seeing it in a theater, even though it's only an hour long. It's much easier, obviously, to stream it. But the eeriness of that voice when you hear it in stereo, it's really whatever is done technically to the human voice to create that statue's voice is not just making it deep and resonant. It's making it sound sort of science fiction-y, as if it's coming out of the future. And so that is really disorienting. After sort of being addressed in a very poetic and abstract way by the statue, it's not like the statue says, like, I'm a statue. I come from this year in this place. This is my, current location and what's about to happen to me. No, the statue always, speaks in this kind of mythic register, right? And then from there, we switch into what you might think of as a very Frederick Wiseman-like world of just chilly observation of the packing up of that statue and some other artworks in Paris to be shipped to Benin. And it's the two modes never really come together, right? Then there's a long middle section of the film, which I thought was the weakest section of the film, honestly, that is about the kind of royal reception, the formal trappings of the reception of the statue into Benin, which are interesting to witness, but I think maybe take up a little bit too much of the 1 hour because things really get snapping in this part that Rebecca was talking about with the students. And again, without any introduction, nobody says like, here are the students from such and such university. They have been invited, right? We're just suddenly in this very fractious room full of all these young kids from Benin, maybe from the age, maybe from like high school through early 20s, right? And they're all debating the meaning of the arrival of these artworks in a way that really opens up a lot of questions. I mean, nobody there is saying that the artworks shouldn't have been returned, I don't think. But as Rebecca says, there are plenty of people who are either resentful at the fact that there are 26 artworks that have been returned out of the approximately 7,000 that were stolen during the colonial wars. There are others who think that it's, kind of a political gesture on the part of either the French government or the Beninese government or both, that it's all about diplomacy and branding and it has nothing to do with the people. Others are upset that the statues are still sitting in a museum, right? They are still in a place where you have to have cultural capital and money to travel there, et cetera. And that lots of the people whose lives might be most informed and changed by coming into contact with this work will never get to see it. And it's a really interesting debate. I mean, it's way more than just two sides. You sort of never know what each next new young Beninese person is going to say during that debate. And then the movie ends on what I think is its most beautiful and lyrical passage, which is just a long montage of people filing through and looking at the statues, including some children, just little kids who never speak at all to the camera, but who we witness them witnessing the artworks. And again, sort of from the artwork's point of view, I loved the way that part was shot, almost through the vitrine, as if you were inside the glass looking out at people. But become clear from us talking about it, like this is a mysterious and kind of impenetrable work, this movie. It makes you want to see it again to sort of figure out how it's all put together. And it makes you want to discuss it with other people afterward. It doesn't at all feel like a documentary that informs you like a museum wall text would inform you and sends you out into the world with a new piece of knowledge. And in fact, it's a little bit frustrating for those who do like to read museum wall texts that we don't learn a lot about these actual artworks. I would have liked to just see them a little bit more. I love that this movie is short and has its own shape, but I think I would have been happy to spend a little bit more time with the camera sort of lingering on these works, including ones besides the guy that talks, the statue whose voice we hear, because there's 26 of them, and I think we only see 3 or 4 of them in any detail at all. But those are pretty small quibbles because this is definitely a documentary that should be seen, and I hope will be.
In addition to everything else, the two of you have given our listeners a sense of how, without being crowded or jumbled or weirdly overstuffed, how much density of meaning has been packed into an hour and 8 minutes. I mean, it is an incredibly rich document in a very small package. And I, for one, am not sure that they blend harmoniously, these various elements that you guys anatomized, but I think that is the strength of the film. I mean, I do think that ultimately there is a kind of weird, ambiguous gestalt in watching the movie that doesn't require all of them to flow, all its 3 or 4 major pieces to flow seamlessly from one to the other. The voiceover wouldn't work if the poetic sensibility writing that text hadn't kind of nailed it. It's exactly that kind of mythic resonance, Dana, is so evocative. It could lapse into just awful kitsch, right? Like it could just be pseudo-profound, sort of refrigerator magnetic dreck. And it never is like that. For example, near the end of the film, I see myself so clearly through you. Within me resonates infinity. And at that point, in it, you feel as though infinity might well resonate within this supposedly insentient object.
About the voice, because it is the writing of the voice is so specific and is different from, it's really the only writing in the film, right? There's no other voiceover at all. That's the only thing that is written. So I think it's worth noting that the writer of those texts only have the voice that the statue speaks in, and also the reader of the text, the person whose voice is being manipulated to produce that voice, is this Haitian poet named Mackenzie Orsel. I would be interested in how he got involved in the project, but it's just the fact that you are hearing it as this kind of unique sound within the movie, I think, comes from the fact that it is this one person's sensibility and speaking voice.
I was going to make a connection that you guys would absolutely hate, which is that the voice of the statue sounds a little bit like the voice of the Venom symbiote and Venom, The Last Dance. But I'll make a connection that you might like more, which is that it also sounds a little bit like the Bene Gesserit voice in Dune Part 2 and also Dune, which you hear at the beginning of the movie and like rocks you. Absolutely. The reason I bring these things up is also to sort of say that this director's first feature is called Atlantics, and I was able to watch a little bit of it, and I'm going to watch the rest because I'm really excited by it. But it also has a science fictional element to it, like a futuristic element that has to do with the sort of transportation of souls across time or souls across space. And I really like any time that someone sort of explores the meaning of history by trying to get into time travel, like not in a Doctor Who kind of way, although I like that too, but time travel in sort of a more mystical way where, you know, there was part of me that thought watching this movie, man, I don't know anything about the history of Dahomey, the history of the Republic of Benin, like any of this stuff. And so afterwards I was going on Wikipedia and I was like, I didn't learn any of this in the movie, like nothing, like the way that the war with the French unfolded and what their structure of government was before that and what their society was like. You get only like meager gleanings of that. But what you do get is this sense of sort of like life force between the statue and the sort of images of the people and the life force of the filmmaker kind of blending all these things together that sort of says something about history that sort of transcends like written knowledge in a way. And I wish more people did that. I really liked that. And it's fine. I can go on Wikipedia afterwards and learn more about Dahomey.
The flip side, too, right? Like, you can't get to the end of this movie and not understand in a fresh way, especially as a global northerner, the grotesqueness of us, quote unquote, having these in our possession in museums. I certainly felt that very strongly at the end of the film. I'm curious if you did.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that's sort of what the part I was describing at the beginning where you see it almost feels like a hospital scene of the artifacts being packed up. And the loneliness of the voiceover of the statue, you know, in that part where the statue is essentially expressing just complete disorientation, you know, like, where am I in space? Where am I in time? What does it mean to be going back? And that's a question that the movie asks in a very complex way. I mean, it's not at all sort of, yay, repatriating artwork is good. You know, there's also not any question that the works should not have stayed where they were, but there's kind of a sense, I think at one point, the Atlantic Ocean by the statue is referred to as a wound. You know, I'm here on the shores of the wound, something like that. You know, and there's just sort of this idea that there's an unhealable scar from the work having been taken and the colonialism having, you know, done its damage in the first place.
The movie, by allowing this very extended sequence, which I found riveting, of these young students debating the significance and testifying to their own personal reaction to these artifacts returning, they're speaking in the language of most often in French in that scene, i.e. the language of the colonial thief and oppressor. And yet they themselves speak to the ambivalence over their ability to speak in exactly that way, like a Western-style educated person. And it's that kind of agony of so many things being true at once that I think the film's various unintegrated elements are trying to get at without pretending to resolve.
For sure. And there's a couple of other references the students make to being taught to argue using citations from Plato and Aristotle. There's another scene in the movie where one of the more observational scenes where the camera lingers on a bookseller outside the palace, I think, who's laying out all of his books, and they're all like Rousseau and Voltaire. You know, paperbacks, worn out paperbacks. I just love the way that the filmmaker has blended sort of her observations of the way this dynamic unfolds in this place. There's another scene that I couldn't stop watching. I think I rewound it, where there's a crew of Beninese people carrying one of the statues up steps, and they're, you know, all African, sort of around this crate. And then there's two white observers that are, it's never explained, you know, what are the roles of these different people. But the white observers are not carrying. They're kind of like walking around the edge of the people who are porting the statue and kind of touching them occasionally on the back, as if to say, good job, or, you know, you're doing it right, or something, you know. And it just was like, you know, Mati Diop is just kind of like hanging back and looking at that. And in the image is such a like history, right? Like such a commentary on the way even the repatriation is unfolding, which she's seeing in this way. But the students are saying it right out, you know, like she's saying it with the camera in certain ways, things that she finds to show this like blend of situations. And the students are saying it right out. And that just really worked for me. That combination of her sort of artistic observation and the students in very college student ways processing and coming to realizations about what they think about that dynamic.
All right. Well, it's an extraordinary film. It's Dahomey. It is in theaters now. It'll eventually be streaming. And we should say that it's the submission of the Senegalese government. Mati Diop, as I said, is Senegalese French for Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars. All right. Please see it. you heard who the latest power couple is? Well, you won't see this coming. It's Discover and Cashback. Feeling let down? You won't be when you hear how Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match, all with no sign-up required and no limit to how much they'll match. See, isn't that a couple you want to root for? It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
Since 1981, Justin has been producing world-class Bordeaux-style wines from Paso Robles on California's Central Coast. As the pioneer of Paso, Justin wines are what put Paso Robles on the winemaking map. With a rich history of accolades, Justin produces exceptional wines and is proud to be America's #1 luxury Cabernet. Justin was kind enough to send me a couple of bottles of wine to try a while back. They were both delicious. I think the most special of the two was their flagship Bordeaux-style red blend, Isosceles, which is just a really balanced, lovely blend that provides everything I like in a wine with dinner. We're talking about making it one of our Thanksgiving wines, and we're having a big Thanksgiving, so we may need a few bottles. Enjoy exceptional wine all season long with Justin. Whether it's for seasonal celebrations, festive dinner parties, or gift exchanges, Justin Wine is sure to make your holidays memorable. Pick up Justin Wine today at a store near you, or visit justinwine.com and enter Gabfest20 for 20% off your order. Justin offers the perfect holiday gifts for clients, colleagues, friends, or family. Be sure to check them out at justinwine.com to receive 20% off your order for a limited time.
In the opening moments of Death, Let Me Do My Special, Rachel Bloom's new Netflix special, I guess it's so special I said special twice, Bloom begins to sing a bawdy song about a malodorous tree, the Bradford pear. When a heckler interrupts her, it's a disorienting moment. The heckler appears real to the audience, live audience. Bloom appears shaken. But as she addresses her would-be tormentor, we realize it's a bit. The heckler is Death in the form of her friend, the actor David Hull. From that moment on, the show is a meditation, alternately agonized and very whimsical, on the pandemic which claimed her friend and collaborator on her TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Adam Schlesinger, who, of course, is the songwriter and founder of the band Fountains of Wayne. That is counterposed by the vulnerabilities of being a new mother. In the clip, we hear Bloom recalling the moment she learned that her dear friend Adam is in the hospital with COVID, while her own baby is in the NICU in Los Angeles. Let's listen.
For the first time in years, I was helpless. I prayed. In my prayer, it started with an apology. I said, "Dear God, I'm very sorry that I haven't spoken to you in a long time. I'm also sorry that I regularly tell everyone you don't exist." But you get why I think that, right? I mean, you understand how I could very logically come to that conclusion. Okay, just table that for now, God. For now, please keep my daughter safe, and please keep Adam safe. And if you do that in exchange, I will think about becoming agnostic.
That's a very fun segment there. Dana, let's start with you. I can't remember. I know we all kind of admired Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Did you stick with it? Were you a fan? And what'd you make of this?
I mean, my relation to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I think I've mentioned before in the show and maybe even endorsed, is that I loved the songs from it. I didn't always watch the show. It's a little bit like John Oliver, where you don't always watch the show, but then you end up seeing some viral bit from it that's great. I mean, I'm so happy that John Oliver's out there. It's a little bit like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend for me. And my daughter in particular, who's a musical theater nerd, used to sometimes just show me songs from the show and we would laugh over them, which relates to this special in that the main composer of songs for that show, along with Rachel Bloom, was Adam Schlesinger, her friend who dies at the beginning of her narration of this special. And so, in fact, I was the one who suggested we do this Rachel Bloom thing. I saw that Rachel Bloom had a stand-up special. I am in need of some anxiety relief right now and thought, it will be fun to watch a Rachel Bloom stand-up special. And I think I was right. This really, really won me over. I think when Death first interrupts at the beginning, that moment when David Hull stands up as the heckler and there's this conceit put in place that her special is being interrupted by Death, I feared hokiness. I feared kind of, a touchy-feely self-help narrative of some kind. It just seemed awkward. And I was on the edge of my seat preparing for some cringe. But it completely won me over by the end. I think, for one thing, the songs, just as was the case in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, the songs are a really great blend of sort of toe-tapping musical theater and, really absurd lyrics that would never be in musical theater and are expressing much more complicated and just also much more everyday kind of anxieties and fears. But yeah, I love that Rachel Bloom is not cool and she doesn't care about being cool. And the world of stand-up, especially the world of stand-up for women, doesn't have that many musical theater nerds who are just kind of, who are just the normal everyday. I feel like Rachel Bloom, and this is part of her appeal in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend as well, feels like a person you would actually know. She might be like a smart, funny, nerdy friend who's just telling you her story. And that's exactly how this story feels. I got completely involved in the story of her kid in the NICU and how it was all going. She herself notes that she's not the only person to have experienced COVID, obviously, in a painful and disorienting way, but she did have a particularly extreme experience, right? Like delivering a child who immediately has to go to the NICU, and then a week later, your best friend and collaborator suddenly dies of COVID. I feel like she narrated that story with so much humanity, but without any kind of whiny narcissism. And I sort of felt like it's a very different kind of show, but it made me think of the Bo Burnham special Inside, which was, of course, made during COVID. And it's a whole different kind of thing and very different tone. But it's also, a musical and a kind of one-man show that is taking isolating, alienating real life events and turning them into a community experience. And I don't know, I found this show really, really moving and funny.
I totally agree. And I was a rat jumping off the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend ship. In other words, someone who watched it for a little while and then stopped. But I loved this. There's a discussion of what happens after her collaborator dies. And then also there's a couple other deaths, like her psychiatrist dies and there's like someone else. And she talks about going to a psychic, and the psychic tells her, she tests the psychic by asking what Adam thinks she should do. Like, did Adam have any project ideas that were left over before he died? And the psychic tells her that Adam thinks that she should do something about the pandemic, like what life is like during the pandemic. And she basically is totally skeptical of that idea and says any basic bitch could think of that, which I kind of love because it was this moment of, like there is this thing that's happened with pandemic pegged or set or related art where people don't really want it. In 2024, I'd say, I feel like the worm started turning in about 2022, to be honest. And now this far along, it's sort of like I'm sort of glad I didn't really 100% register that this special was going to be about her COVID experience, because it's really not about that, but it is about that in certain ways. But she recognizes that you might be tired of hearing about it or that you might sort of resist it a little bit. It's really about like having a midlife realization that this isn't going to go on. And she's like really good at sort of presenting how ridiculous it is to even say that. There's this amazing moment where she's talking about what her life was like right before the pandemic hit and right before she gave birth, because I think she's like 9 months pregnant in March 2020 or something. And to Dana's point about not being worried about kind of seeming ridiculous, like she puts this picture up on screen of her hugely pregnant and dancing in this like shiny outfit with like these huge boobs and this huge belly. And she's like, she looks like she's having like the best possible time. She's definitely in the before times, as you would say. But it's not just about like before COVID, I thought differently. It's like before parenthood, I thought differently. And before being, I don't know how old she is, I think like 37 or something, before becoming like a more middle-aged person, I sort of just thought this would go on. And now I'm realizing it's not going to go on. And how is my brain going to kind of adapt and relate to that? I think that's a really rich vein, at least for me personally, as a person who has had this set of revelations in the past 5 years or so as well.
It's interesting, Rebecca. I had the same reaction about going back to COVID. It's funny that I wonder if this resonates with you guys, that there's just kind of an amnesia around the COVID years, the kind of a blankness. I mean, obviously part of it is you're trapped indoors. There's a uniformity to it, accepting major life events that intruded, as happened with Rachel Bloom. It's also tended to be highly passive. You just weren't sort of doing much other than coping and forming this unit. And it's very much like the Spanish flu, which we talked about when the pandemic hit, that its place for the massive disruptions that it caused and the amount of death that it brought to humanity, it's been subsumed under World War I, as this sort of scythe that just kind of swept through, and killed hundreds of millions of people more or less simultaneously. And just personally, I've been astounded to discover how much amnesia I have around it and how little I feel like I want to revisit it, even though, of course, it was highly dramatic. And I didn't feel any temptation to pursue a reckoning of COVID at all. But then, of course, this just, moves into a much, much larger topic. It moves even, you could argue, beyond the specifics of the loss, the horrible loss.
It becomes really about finitude, right? And about grappling with
exactly
the
where
idea that everything dies, everyone dies.
Exactly. It moves from the point of the whole piece, as I understand it, is this kind of jarring juxtaposition between the loss of a close friend and collaborator and the birth of a child in an existential sense. Like, why did I have a kid if oblivion wins in the end, right? Like, why did I create another Dyer? I just brought another pre-dead creature into the world for what, And what's funny about that is how lighthearted and whimsical she is, at the same time how deeply serious and actually in its way like quite profound she is about that question simultaneously. And those come together in this number. I do not want to spoil at all, but the musical number that involves pets and towards the end, which is it's a callback to something she's done earlier in the show, I thought was lovely and quite wonderful. That said, I think I am the dissenter on the panel, and I'm trying to puzzle out why. I just don't feel a connection to her. I mean, is the simple way of saying it. That theater, that sort of out and proud theater nerdiness that then attempts to be rescued with a degree of like I know this is absurd, winky irony. Like, she does it beautifully. I mean, she's supremely talented, right? And the songs carry off. She's got an amazing voice and presence. Okay, I say this advisedly, but I'm just very curious to hear what the other panelists think. Something about the kind of let's put on a show energy of this, special, which is just infused. I mean, Dana, you said stand up. It really isn't. It's a one-woman show very much in a musical theater vein. And it's kind of its need to ingratiate and engage the audience in the ways that it does being in that genre somehow, to me, couldn't quite honor the quite serious depth of the material behind it somehow.
I can see it. It's not the way that I responded, I think probably because the motherhood stuff was working so well for me. Like, the musical theater affective presentation, there's one song where she's singing about her child sleeping and the weird mix of hoping that your child sleeps, but also wanting them to stay awake so that they're alive. And that sort of delving into the dramatic emotions of early motherhood is something we've seen a lot of. And I'm honestly starting to get a little bit tired of it in certain ways. I'm one of the people who's seen the trailers for the upcoming movie Night Bitch and been like, oh my God, more of this. Like, yes, I know having a little baby is crazy, but the humor and the sort of enhanced affect, I think, worked for me, and sort of her sort of a little bit self-deprecating representation of how mad you feel as a mother when your baby is really little. That worked. And I think maybe because I was thinking more about that part of the show than about the my collaborator died part, it didn't bump on me as much that there was like a disconnect between the medium and the message, I guess. But Dana, what did you think?
I mean, Adam, I felt like she honored him in a wonderful way. And in fact, it wasn't until about 3/4 of the way through that she ever said his last name. So the whole time she was talking about, my collaborator, Adam. And I should have put that together because I know he was the co-songwriter on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. But like I said, I wasn't a regular watcher of the show, but I am a huge, huge fan since forever of Fountains of Wayne and of all the wonderful music he wrote for movies. And I remember him dying in early COVID and how awful it was. And just the moment when I put it together, like, it's Adam Schlesinger she's talking about. I got tears in my eyes. I felt like she sang and spoke of him and to him with so much respect and love and humor.
I agree. I just want to be absolutely clear. I never felt like she was exploiting her friend's death. That wasn't it. It was more something about the way this particular medium of musical theater and on, it never came into harmonic accordance for me in a way that it would have to for someone who thought it worked. Okay, it's the special is Death, Let Me Do My Special. So special, I keep saying it twice. It's from Rachel Bloom. It's on Netflix. Curious to know what our listeners think of it.
Listening to audiobooks or podcasts or anything else on audible.com helps your imagination soar. No matter what genre you love, you can be inspired to imagine new worlds, new possibilities, and new ways of thinking. I'm always happy when Audible advertises on our podcast because I can full-throatedly say that I'm an Audible user almost every day, really. I basically have an audiobook going at all times, and so does everybody in my family. So there's often a scramble when the day of the month comes that the new Audible credit appears, like who's going to get the new audiobook that they want to get first. If I had to recommend something on Audible, Juliet Stevenson, the great British actress, she is my absolute favorite audiobook reader, and the stuff that she reads is my favorite stuff to listen to on audiobook. She reads the Brontes, she reads a bunch of Jane Austen, she reads a bunch of Virginia Woolf, she reads Transit of Venus. If you want, you can start that way. Just find a reader you love, a voice that you really, really love to read books to you, and listen to everything they read. That's what I'm doing with her. Audible listeners can also enjoy Words and Music, which are original musical narratives and audio productions designed exclusively for Audible listeners. Audible makes it easy to be inspired and entertained as a part of your daily routine without needing to set aside extra time. That's the key. You listen to it while you're doing your household chores, your commutes, things like that. There's more to imagine when you listen. New members can try Audible now free for 30 days with your first audiobook included. Visit audible.com/culture or text culture to 500-500. That's audible.com/culture or text culture to 500-500.
At T. Rowe Price, our curiosity lights the way to help you plan ahead for what matters to you most. Work directly with us, and together we can help uncover the right investments for you at every stage of your life, whatever your goals. That's the power of curiosity. Better questions, better outcomes. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence. Visit troweprice.com/investdirect to learn more.
All right, for our third topic, we are inspired to talk about Mark Zuckerberg by a kind of wonderfully provocative and funny piece on Lucy, the website, I guess, Lucy, by Brendon Holder. What is Mark Zuckerberg wearing? And Dana, it gets into this sort of semiotics of Zuckerberg's new look. But for those of our listeners who haven't seen this yet, walk us through some of them.
I mean, the descriptions that Holder gives are better than probably what I'm going to come up with from looking at these pictures. But I just felt like since we're talking about a visual element here, I should describe some of what we're looking at. So some of the images of the new Zuckerberg include, maybe you've seen this, like he's grown his curly hair out so that it's sort of, this much more flowing, gelled, kind of in your face style. He's wearing a lot of gold chains, like big, thick gold chains that are sort of maybe kick back to 90s rap in some way. He's wearing a lot of sunglasses. There's a picture of him at some cocktail party wearing a big black t-shirt that says Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed in Latin, plus a gold chain while holding a cocktail. He just in general seems to have rebranded. Oh yeah, he's wearing like a pair of shorts and a big Balmain, designer t-shirt with sunglasses, face stubble. He just in general is trying to rock this more sort of, I'm not just a nerd with, identical t-shirts. That used to be his style before, right? Zuckerberg used to be known for, like Steve Jobs, having a uniform, and his uniform was sort of like a neutral colored t-shirt and jeans. But he's rebranded himself now as sort of like disco 90s rap Mark Zuckerberg, and this piece is trying to understand why.
Rebecca, we should send people to the piece. It's incredibly fun, and it's filled with all these wonderful riffs and detours and asides. What do you make, I guess, of the piece, but also in a larger sense, like, is it worth poring over what Mark Zuckerberg is wearing?
Yes, 100%. I feel like an important sort of backstory or context to this whole conversation is the fact that he used to be not just like kind of plain looking, but like actively dorky. Like you guys may or may not remember the picture of him surfing that went viral. And I think it was in 2020 in like the height of everyone doing outdoors things instead of indoors things.
Oh, yeah. He had mineral sunscreen on, right? So he was like ghostly white.
Yes. Yeah. He had a full face of mineral sunscreen. And also, like, this is kind of rude, but like he had whatever he was wearing, it showed that he had like a big butt kind of. So it became like this object of fun online. You know, people kind of joking about his physique and his sunscreen, sort of equivalent to when Elon Musk had a picture go viral of him coming out of the ocean on a yacht and getting hosed down by another billionaire. So he used to be, I'm sorry, it's true. That picture did go viral. He didn't look great in it. But Zuckerberg has also gotten really into mixed martial arts. He's sort of become, he's become.
No, I love that this is where I was going to go, the Volkanovsky clip.
Yes.
Or Volkanovsky clip. Yes, you go.
Yes. And but so I think what's interesting is when I first started seeing pictures of him with like the loosened up hair and the chain, I was like, ooh, like, yeah, he does look cute, like not bad or whatever. And then, you know, in prepping for this segment, we read quite a few pieces. Like this has become like an object of comment, kind of tying this new way of appearing to Zuck trying to be a little bit more like an asshole tech bro and less like a regular tech bro. And so this is sort of something that crept up on us a little bit, I feel like, but throughout the 2010s, I feel like Silicon Valley, maybe I think of the show Silicon Valley, right? In the show Silicon Valley, the caricature of the tech bro was like, they're assholes, but they pretend to care. You know, at every presentation, you know, whenever they're pitching like a new app that they're going to develop or whatever, they'll say, this is going to change the world because we're going to come together. And now, you know, there's a sort of a little mini trend among tech people as among just like people across the United States, seemingly, of just owning being a jerk. Like, I just don't care. I'm just rich. And so in reading this piece on Lucy, I guess you would call it a Substack. I'm not sure. It is a Substack, but like, I've never known what an individual Substack is supposed to be called, an entry, maybe. There's a lot of connections made between, you know, like the Latin phrases on his sort of custom made t-shirts and like the tech bro and podcast bro world's like obsession with the Roman Empire and everything having to do with like, you know, Stoic philosophy and like all of these like sort of like bits of faux wisdom that they're sort of leveraging into being more and more evil and like libertarian and individualistic and uncaring, and sort of a connection between, you know, mixed martial arts is sort of also part of that world. I don't know. In a way, it's like he looks more likable, but he's sort of doing it by way of connecting to this world that, you know, Donald Trump is also trying to tap into right now, like by going on like a run of podcasts that are beloved by this kind of person. We're going to make AI and it's going to like eat all of the water and emit all of the carbon. And like, you guys are going to like it because I look cool now, is now my understanding of it. And to have come around to that from my initial response, which was, oh, he looks cool. I kind of feel like a dupe, but I do think it's interesting.
Right. Like, so one must never forget that this person is a huge, huge dork, a low EQ dork who, had it not been for striking it rich with a dumb, mostly now obsolete website, would be someone you would edge away from in a party. And he's stuck in a way with this gigantic fortune that hasn't turned him into either a real human being or a good fake one or a scary fake one, you know, the way Trump and Peter Thiel and Musk are scary fake ones. He's caught betwixt and between these two. And at this point, you know, Facebook is almost like legacy media. I mean, if you ask any person, I mean, practically under the age of 40, but under 30 and almost screamingly so under 20 about Facebook, and they'll just laugh. They'll stare at you blankly or laugh at you. I mean, to them, it's like saying, do you subscribe to Time magazine, you know? And what does he have? He just has nothing but money and time. And so he gets up to stupid shit. I mean, that clip that I was referencing where he's in the corner of an MMA fight, the man at points was the richest person in the world. He's not now, but he's one of a handful of them. If he wants to be, he can insert himself Zelig-like into anybody's actual 3D reality and be there. And he wanted to try to bro it up and be in this corner. And the way they're ignoring him and treating him as if he is this prep school nerd that fell from the sky, but they don't have the time or energy to get rid of while they're actually preparing to have the fight. It's fucking hilarious because it's just the utter discrepancy between this man's bank account and his contributions to humanity and his state of his soul and personality will just never get old to me. I mean, they just speak to some really elemental and horrifying truth about the time we live in. This piece, which is very fun, makes an elemental mistake and gets one thing elementally exactly right. The mistake is that it's posited that one of the reasons we should go to great semiotic lengths to try to deconstruct or whatever, pick over his outfits, is that he himself, on his end, with all that money and all that time and influence and power, must be working with handlers and beauticians and dressing people and semioticians on his end because they're always trying to send a signal. I think that it's entirely possible. It seems way more likely to me that someone like Zuckerberg wakes up in the morning, still doesn't have a personality or an intellect, and goes in search of one in an outfit or his new friends. He's a weakling. He's hanging out with these sort of pseudo-alpha, pseudo-Nietzscheans out in Silicon Valley. And he wants to be, Rebecca, you nailed it. They've taken a turn towards cruelty is the point, and masters of the universe, and we're going to negatively externalize the ugliness of our own personalities and the economic consequences of the things we make at the cost of humanity. And that's what we get out of doing it, right? Like that, the sort of Nietzschean jouissance of being able to do it and force a future nobody wants on all of humanity. And he's just kind of not that guy. He's a patsy who was there early, and his happened to be marginally better than MySpace and Friendster. The thing that it gets absolutely elementally right is its callback to the best Sorkin movie, or certainly one of them. I actually kind of secretly admire a surprising amount of what Sorkin has done, but The Social Network just nailed this guy perfectly, like a little butterfly, pins in
It's true.
every
It understood
wing.
Him better than it understood the internet.
I absolutely agree. It just little pins in the wings of a butterfly forever. Just this and the openings that also right in the piece is the throwback to that opening scene, which is just, when you read it, it is a masterclass in screenwriting. He's being incredibly mean to his girlfriend in a bar. He shits all over her intellect. He makes fun of the fact that she's at BU or BC, which of course is in Harvard. He's just a little turd, right? A little screen-addicted turd who should never be around actual human beings. And she just dumps him. But before she goes, she says, "You are probably going to be..." I think she holds his hand and says it in a tone of pity.
And it's Rooney Mara. You have to imagine Rooney Mara in a Fair Isle sweater, very preppy, saying this.
"You are probably going to be a very successful computer person. You are going to go through life thinking girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that won't be true. It will be because you're an asshole." And if only we could listen to our prophets, because in that moment, Sorkin was a prophet. Like, these guys are just fucking assholes. And why do we want to live on the wrong side of that transaction?
I do have one more thing to say about this, which is just to maybe slightly differentiate. And it's not a hierarchizing difference, but there is space between what he's up to and what Elon Musk is up to, right? Obviously, in terms of like being a gazillionaire, ruining the world in various ways. And part of it is that, in a much more typical Silicon Valley way, he's trying to remain in this vague libertarian space where he's not aligned, right? He hasn't endorsed any candidate. He hasn't, that we know of, given money to any candidate. But I do think that this alignment Rebecca's talking about, he's aligning himself with the return, kind of movement, right? The idolization of ancient Rome by various right-wing, like moron boys. And I believe that when Trump was shot at that rally in Pennsylvania, that Zuckerberg said something about he's a badass, right? I think that was quoted in something that we read here. So, there's this alignment with the right that's sort of a wimpy alignment with the right that goes along with this whole new look of his.
I would venture to predict, I think everything you guys say is right, although I disagree with you, Steve, about this being doomed to failure. I think I don't know. I feel like we're in a bubble where most people think Elon Musk sucks and is like the most cringe possible thing, like, and share the clips of him at the recent Trump rally at Madison Square Garden with like glee because he looks so ridiculous. But a lot of people still love Elon Musk. A lot of people do.
Well, I don't think what Musk is doing is doomed to fail. I think we're 7 days away from it possibly succeeding beyond anybody's wildest imagination.
Don't say it, Steve.
But I just think Zuckerberg is a doofus, and anything he does, and Facebook is played, and their attempt to go into virtual reality is just a joke. I mean, they just, I think Peter Thiel and Elon Musk may own, the deed to my house within 6 weeks. I really believe that. But Zuckerberg, no.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough about the future of AI to know, but I do know that he's now an AI person. So it may or may not work out. But I would venture to predict that, well, let's say this. If Trump wins, I think we're going to see him becoming more and more accommodating. I mean, we are seeing it. We are seeing elite accommodation to Trump on like all levels right now. We are recording this a couple of days after Jeff Bezos forced the Washington Post to not endorse anyone rather than endorse Kamala Harris for president. And these guys are just, I don't think they ever cared about this stuff. Like, I think they just always wanted to sort of make money and like be at the top of the heap. And now it's sort of starting to seem like you can just be at the top of the heap and not apologize, as, Zuckerberg quipped in the recording of a podcast, I don't apologize anymore. Like this is like a playbook that has been now in 2024 set out for this kind of guy that he's just following. And I just think the incentive to not follow it is like diminishing because people are just like tired of being mad about it, which is a dynamic that is a problem for our entire electorate and possibly the future of our country. But yeah, I think he's just going to kind of just slide further and further into this world. That's my prediction.
I agree with you 100%, Rebecca. And it just shows for the millionth time that at least what a certain kind of man, if not all men, want is not money. What they want, Zuckerberg has more than 100,000 lifetimes could ever spend. What they want is status vis-a-vis other men. And what Zuckerberg has is money. What he doesn't have is what he perceives to be status or standing among his peers. And so he is a follower and a beta male within that. So will he participate in the destruction of the world? He already has and will continue to do so. But will he be a ringleader, malevolent overlord the way Musk is? I suspect no, but it sounds like we agree. Anyway, the piece is really fun. We're going to link to it. It's really worth reading. Have you heard who the latest power couple is? Well, you won't see this coming. It's Discover and Cashback. Feeling let down? You won't be when you hear how Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match, all with no sign-up required and no limit to how much they'll match. See, isn't that a couple you want to root for? It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
It's the time for business, and our only business item is to tell you about our Slate Plus bonus episode, which will be available to Slate Plus members. And remember that these bonus episodes now appear separately in your feed from the main episode. This week, we're going to be talking about TV. We talk about TV almost every week, but we're going to be talking about TV in a larger sense, departing from this GQ roundup of different opinions, suggestions, recommendations on what to watch and how to watch television in our new post-prestige, post-streaming, flailing around among various streamers, confusing TV era. We thought we would use that as a way to riff on our own TV watching practices and behaviors and how, if at all, we would like to change them. If you're a Slate Plus member, you get ad-free podcasts, you get bonus episodes like the one I just described, the segment I just described, and many other shows have them too. And best of all, you get unlimited access to all of the writing and all of the podcasting on Slate.com. When you're supporting Slate Plus, you're supporting us. You're keeping the studio lights on, keeping this show going, and keeping the whole magazine afloat. So please sign up today at slate.com/cultureplus. That's slate.com/cultureplus. You can also subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page. All right, back to the show.
All right, now is the moment in our podcast when we endorse Dana.
All right. Well, Steve, you and I, before we started taping today, were talking about how ridiculous it feels to even be making a culture podcast at this exact moment in history, like 1 week before the election, how incredibly hard it is. We're not the only ones to focus on anything other than our anxiety about what's about to happen. So in that vein, I'm going to endorse something that I guess is a political, cultural moment. It's also just a tiny little soundbite that you've probably already heard about. But my endorsement is to actually listen to and watch, if you have not, the moment on the Twitch stream between AOC and Tim Walz, where Tim Walz calls Hinchcliffe, that comedian who, made the racist joke that's rightfully making everyone insane at the Madison Square Garden rally, a jackwad. Have you seen this, Steve?
I haven't.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Who is that jackwad? Who is that guy?
Actually, I think that's Tony Hinchcliffe, which is super disappointing. He's a comedian. I don't follow
this
crew
issue
very
with Puerto
closely,
Rico
but...
again. I saw it.
Oh my God. When my husband got home last night, he had heard the word. He said, yeah, I heard that Tim Walz called him a jackwad, and that's hilarious. I said, no, you have to see it. You have to see it in action, because it's Tim Walz so being Tim Walz. Like, it so obviously is not rehearsed, and that's just like an insult in his vocabulary that is so accurately applied to this comedian. And just the fact that there was a Twitch stream with AOC and Tim Walz during this MSG rally is in itself hilarious. As Jamel Bowie posted about this on Blue Sky while it was happening, he said, I would legit watch a weekly Twitch stream of AOC and Tim Walz just commenting on things. But anyway, the moment that, we hear, I think it was the Puerto Rico joke, yeah, but we hear one of the incredibly offensive jokes this guy told at the rally, and then you just see a little frame with Tim Walz going, who is that jackwad? And I really recommend that people watch the actual clip. We'll put it on the show page.
I love it. And may that please turn things in our favor. Oh, my God. Rebecca, what do you have?
I'm going to endorse a book that was published, I believe, in August. It's called The Voyage Home by Pat Barker. This is the last in the trilogy of the Women of Troy series. And there's been like an absolute trend of sort of like books written from the point of view of historical women who didn't get a voice in the official retelling of history. I think Pat Barker's Women of Troy series is like one of the best versions of this. It's just books written from the point of view of the Trojan women and the women from the little towns around Troy who get made captive in the course of the war. And this last one is mostly from the point of view of Cassandra, although also from the point of view of a couple of her female servants, and what unfolds when she is taken back with Agamemnon, and, well, everyone knows what happens. Bloody murder occurs. I loved it. I think it's some of my favorite historical fiction that I've read recently. So I do recommend it. If anyone hasn't caught up, there are now 3 books of it, and I think this is the last one. It's a Pat Barker, and it's The Voyage Home, the Women of Troy series, number 3.
Oh, wow. That sounds amazing. Okay, I'm going to endorse the pieces published right around the 2000 election by the writer Todd Gitlin. Gitlin, known for a lot of things, died recently in the last 3 or 4 years. He was the second or third head of the Students for Democratic Society, the sort of original student protest group of the 60s, and by far the biggest one.
And a Village Voice writer mainly, right?
Village Voice writer, leader of the New Left, who in the 2000 election became appalled at the possibility that people were going to not vote meaningfully against George W. Bush, and argued very persuasively and very intelligently against a vote for Nader. And it turns out horribly presciently, because, of course, it was the third party candidacy of Nader that upended Florida and lost us the election. Gitlin then wrote a series of pieces that we'll also link to later about what the social cost of that was. But it was going in. He was writing about this before the vote, saying you cannot vote for Ralph Nader. It is a vote for W. And here's the consequences of it. And what he does is he both projects into the future of how W is going to make things worse, quite correctly. But he also goes back and says, do you understand how much ground was lost? Especially if you're a younger person, you cannot understand how much ground was lost when Reagan was elected in 1980. That, in fact, we've never recovered levels of equality, environmental protection, women's rights, civil rights. All of it represents a massive and grotesque loss of possibility and human possibility because of that one election. And, the best we've been able to do over 8 years of Clinton is some clawback and some recovery, as horribly compromised as that administration turned out to be. And I think it's obvious why I might be endorsing this now. I would like someone to explain to me how it is somehow so morally tainting to vote for a candidate who you find imperfect for reasons that I'm sure I find them imperfect too, whoever they may be. And that somehow will put some kind of stain on your conscience or blood on your hands. But the difference between how that person would govern and the other person would govern never affects your own conscience. I will never understand that moral calculus. And after 2000 and Bush Gore, when 500,000 Iraqis are dead because a bunch of people voted their conscience in Florida, I don't understand how that calculation could happen again. So it's not up to me to tell you who to vote for president, but I think you could probably extrapolate from what I've just said. Get off your fucking ass and get out there and save democracy. A lot of people will suffer less. You might not, but a lot of people will suffer less because of the lesser of two evils. Dana, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks so much for having me.
You'll find links to some of the things we talked about today at our show. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. The introductory theme music to the show is by the composer Nicholas Bertel. Our production assistant is Kat Hong. Our producer is Jared Downing. For Dana Stevens and Rebecca Onion, I'm Stephen Metcalf. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you soon.
Building a business may feel like a big jump, but OnDeck Small Business Loans can help keep you afloat. With lines of credit up to $100,000 and term loans up to $250,000, OnDeck lets you choose the loan that's right for your business. As a top-rated online small business lender, OnDeck's team of loan advisors can help you find the right business loan to fit your needs. Visit OnDeck.com for more information. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or Celtic Bank. OnDeck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.